The tale of Southtown didn't just start with the legend of the Hungry Wolf. Many years before the Bogard brothers returned to Southtown to get vengeance on its kingpin, another family came under fire by the city's criminal underworld, the Sakazakis. Before we continue, if you like what you see and you want to explore the lore of other series, then go ahead and check out the other videos on the channel. Takuma Sakazaki was a great martial artist and master of the Kyokugen school of karate. In his youth, he had many friends, but even more enemies. When his wife, Renette, died in a car accident, Takuma immediately assumed foul play and left his young children, 10-year-old Ryo and 6-year-old Yuri, to find the killer. Ryo was forced to grow up quickly. He took on construction jobs to help support himself and his sister. He also took up street fighting to practice karate without a master. He learned a lot from his father before Takuma's departure, but it still took many years and many beatings before he earned the title of the Invincible Dragon. Though their family was broken, he and Yuri remained strong together. Their little family also had one more member, Robert Garcia. He was the son of one of Takuma's closest friends, and had been the only other student that the Kyokugen master had taken on. After Takuma's disappearance, Robert returned to Italy with his father, but as adults, he and Ryo reconnected, becoming inseparable partners in combat. Robert came to be known as the Raging Tiger. Over the years that his children grew up, Takuma followed the clues to Southtown. However, by that time, the former master was a shell of his old self. He had fallen into a deep pit of debt, fueled by a gambling addiction. He was only pulled out of this hole by the help of a handsome rich young man named Geese Howard, who offered to pay off Takuma's debts in return for his service. Takuma agreed, not realizing that his new savior was the up-and-coming kingpin of Southtown. He soon learned the truth, but Geese forced his hand by kidnapping Yuri, now a teenager. With no choice left to protect his daughter's life, Takuma put on a mask, becoming a figure known as Mr. Karate to safeguard the reputation of both his family and his school. And, as Mr. Karate, he committed the crime the Geese had dreamed about for years: the murder of Jeff Bogard, setting off the events of Fatal Fury a decade later. But not everyone was going to take Howard's blackmail laying down. Where Takuma had folded under the pressure, Ryo and Robert decided to act. They followed her abductors to Southtown. To save her, they fought their way through the city's entire criminal underworld. With Geese out of town on business, his empire was under the watchful eye of his lieutenant, Mr. Big. Big had, at one point, been the kingpin of Southtown himself. However, when Geese stepped into the arena of crime, Big's empire had been stolen from beneath his feet. Not one to be kept down, Big dug his heels in and worked his way back up the ranks to become Geese's right-hand man. It was under his orders that Yuri was kidnapped, and it was he that Ryo and Robert would need to face. Upon arriving in the city, their first opponent was Ryuhaku Todo, the creator of his own school of jiu-jitsu. He was a rival of Takuma in their youth and was likely delighted to learn of his old foe's situation. After a humiliating defeat, Todo sent the two to see Jack Turner, one of Mr. Big's highest-rated subordinates. He was the leader of a bike gang and a violent criminal in his own right. However, he did have a code to never hurt women or children, and told Ryo where he'd last seen the girl, in Chinatown. There, the pair found Li Pai Long, the son of an old friend of Takuma's. He instead suggested that they turn their attention to the restaurant L'Amour, whose bouncer served as one of Mr. Big's enforcers. This bouncer was King. Much like Takuma, she only worked for Big reluctantly. She had a younger brother, Jean, who was unable to walk, and she hoped to use the money from the syndicate to pay for an operation to fix that. After being defeated, she told Ryo exactly where Mr. Big could be found: on a military aircraft carrier docked at the city's pier. She instructed him to find disgraced boxer Mickey Rogers, who had been forced out of the ring after accidentally killing an opponent, to get them to the pier. The carrier, known as the Guardian, was captained by Captain John Crawley, a military man whose life had been saved by Mr. Big when they served together in the Navy. While Big had left the service, he still kept in contact with Crawley. He would use his connections to help out his old friend. Finally, in a factory near the aircraft carrier, Ryo and Robert met Mr. Big in person. Despite Big's strength, he was still no match for the dragon and the tiger, falling before them. Defeated, Big pointed them to the place where Yuri was being held captive, a nearby karate studio, where she was being guarded by Mr. Karate himself. Father and son dueled, the irony of the situation unknown to Ryo until the battle was over. Yuri was freed and revealed Mr. Karate's true identity. Takuma told his story and was surprised to find forgiveness at the hands of the children that he'd abandoned. The four of them returned to their home, where Takuma handed control of the family dojo and the title of Kyokugen Master to Ryo, before opening his own school nearby. And for a time, they lived in peace. At least, I think that's what happened. There are a lot of inconsistencies with this story and how it fits into the larger universe as a whole, especially timeline-wise. And not only that, the original game actually left on a cliffhanger. We didn't actually get to know who Mr. Karate was until Art of Fighting 2. However, in the Super Nintendo version, the conversation continued with the revelation of Mr. Karate's identity and Takuma telling the story of where he'd been over these past 11 years. This is also the only version of the story that says that Takuma killed Jeff Bogard, which is where one of the timeline issues comes up, because this game takes place in 1978, while Fatal Fury suggested that Jeff actually died in 1980. Other versions of the game instead tell the story that Takuma never fell into debt. Just like Ryo and Robert would in later years, he fought his way up to the top of Southtown Syndicate and came face to face with Geese. However, Geese had an ace up his sleeve: his children, who at this point in the story were still, somewhere around 6 and 10 years old. It was a pretty simple deal. If Takuma served Geese, then Geese wouldn't have his children killed. And so Takuma was forced to take on the role of Mr. Karate. And that's where he was for 11 years, not gambling away every dollar he had. Things only kicked off when Geese left town and Mr. Big decided to take things up a notch by kidnapping Yuri. This version also suggests that, for some unknown reason, Geese was the one who had Renette killed. A question that was not answered in the original version of events. However, once again, the timeline doesn't add up, because at the time that Renette died, Geese was only 14 years old. By this point, he had never approached his father, lost a fight to his half-brother, he hadn't even met Jeff Bogard yet. So that doesn't really line up with him being involved in organized crime at that point. So out of our two options that neither really works perfectly, I chose the one that I felt works better. Reasonable minds may vary, it's fine if you disagree with me, this is just where I sit on the matter. Also, given what we see in the game, if the Southtown Syndicate was in fact behind Renette's death, I find the most likely culprit to be Ryohaka Toda. This is because he's the only member of Geese's organization with an individualized motive against Takuma specifically. Now, one question that does have a clear answer is the identity of the canon protagonist. The story mode only has 2 playable characters, Ryo and Robert. While both were present for the whole story, the game is very insistent about Ryo being the main protagonist. Robert really gets the short end of the stick for most of the series, so don't expect him to actually be important for quite a while. As for the timeline, as I said earlier, this game takes place in 1978, 13 years before the original Fatal Fury game. And that's it for this video. If you want to know my favorite character in the game, then it's going to have to go to King. When I played my first King of Fighters game, which was 1998, I was immediately drawn to her design and gameplay. Learning more about her history and her character has only made me enjoy playing her so much more. Tell me who your favorite characters are in the comments. I'll try to continue this series as more DLC characters release for City of the Wolves, so come and check back in every 2 months or so if you want to see more episodes of this series. Alternatively, you could just subscribe and also check out the other videos I release in the in-between if you're interested. And with that, I'll let you go. Take care, and I'll see you next time.